So for those of you who have followed this channel now for more than a year, you know that we spent most of 2017 fighting this individual here. His name is Ruben Kihuen. He is the representative in the 4th Congressional District of the state of Nevada. And there was a town hall that I reported on this podcast on Mother's Day weekend of 2017. And Amy Vilela, you all know her as a congressional candidate, showed up to that town hall. This was before she was a politician and was just an activist, and she asked him to co-sponsor H.R. 676, which is the Medicare for All bill. Now, he said no after she told her story about how her daughter died because we don't have a Medicare for All system, essentially. She was refusing to allow her daughter Shalyn and her story to not get out, so she did what any grieving mother would do: go to her congressperson and advocate for her daughter and make sure that what happened to her and her daughter never happens to anyone else. And she pleaded with Ruben Kihuen to co-sponsor H.R. 676, and he told her no. Now, what happened next was really remarkable, because she then chose to primary him, run against him in that district, and she teamed up with Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress, and Amy announced her campaign on the Humanist Report because a lot of my viewers were following this story so closely. And look, we've been putting a lot of pressure on Kihuen ever since that town hall. We sent so many calls to his DC and Nevada offices that we filled up his voicemail inboxes. I mean, he knew that he outraged thousands of progressives across the country by having the audacity to say no to Medicare for All after a mother just explained how important it is to him. Now, what ended up happening was there was a scandal. There were sexual misconduct, specifically sexual harassment allegations, I believe, that surfaced against Ruben Kihuen, and then he decided to not seek re-election. And this is all something that happened during the campaign. And at that point, Amy Vilela became the de facto presumptive nominee because she was the only one in the race, and she was certainly the most progressive. However, the establishment had other plans. Someone named Stephen Horsford, who represented the 4th Congressional District before Ruben Kihuen and lost after one term, became a lobbyist. He flew to DC, became a lobbyist, and then he came back to run for his old seat again, and the establishment essentially got behind Stephen Horsford. And he won. He beat Amy Vilela. So now we're at a point where Ruben Kihuen is on his way out, Stephen Horsford is on his way in, and he is no more likely to support Medicare for All than Ruben Kihuen. But we're going to get some closure to a chapter in a story that has been absolutely crazy. I don't know how else to describe it. Because what happened today on the House floor showed that progressives are powerful. We are a force because we absolutely can change people's hearts and minds. Even the coldest people, seemingly the coldest people in the country, can be moved by our pleas for Medicare for All. And this is what happened today on the House floor.
Unacceptable that in one of the richest and most powerful countries in the world, a tragedy like this can still occur. Everyone in the United States of America should have access to a quality and affordable health insurance. Access to health care is a basic human right, and no one should ever be denied Medicare because of their inability to pay. This is why, Mr. Speaker, I recently pledged my support to the Medicare for All Act, which provides universal coverage to all those living in the United States of America. My deepest condolences go out to the Vilela family. And Shalyn, this one's for you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So not only did Ruben Kihuen publicly endorse Medicare for All and make a passionate defense for why we need Medicare for All, he did a tribute to Shalyn. That was so powerful because it's clear he had a change of heart. What Amy Vilela told him, the story she shared about her daughter Shalyn that day, it did resonate with him. Little did we know it actually did strike a chord with him. The question, obviously, is why did you wait so long? Why did you not co-sponsor HR 676 the day after she shared her story with you? Why do it now when you're on your way out and it really doesn't make that big of a difference? Well, Ruben Kihuen actually met up with Amy Vilela, and he explained that he was kind of with her all along. He just wasn't able to act or was discouraged from acting because there are very powerful forces in DC that tried to stop him.
Hey everybody, welcome to Washington DC. Amy Vilela.
Hi.
We're so happy to share your story, your daughter's story.
I want to thank you. It's been a long journey, and I really appreciate it.
Look, first of all, I just want to say this is coming from the heart. You know, I'm not running for re-election. This is something that I wanted to do. From the time that you and I, had our town hall meeting, you shared your story. Something that I felt it was the right thing to do from the heart. And I think this is the right thing to do it. You know, I wanted to do it, talk to my chief of staff and my team, and I said, look, I want to do this. I've been wanting to sign on to Medicare for All for a long time. And because we had Washington, D.C. consultants saying, no, this doesn't look good for your re-election, they were pushing back. But I believe this is the right thing to do. This is not politics. Your story touched me. Your daughter's story touched me. Just reading, about your daughter in the last few days, honestly really touched me. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to do this.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so everyone else that's losing people every year. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to give you
Absolutely.
Now, the audio wasn't the best, but in case you couldn't make out what he was saying, he said, I've been wanting to sign on to Medicare for All for a long time. But, quote, we had Washington, D.C. consultants saying this doesn't look good for your re-election, who are pushing back. In other words, we may have more allies in Congress than we think, but there are powerful forces, consultants, lobbyists, who are trying to discourage them from doing the right thing. Now, does Ruben get a pass because he was convinced that signing on to Medicare for All would hurt his re-election campaign? No, not really, because you've got to have the courage to do what's right in spite of whatever negative repercussions might come your way. You might sign on to Medicare for All and then have lobbyists or healthcare industry professionals, the CEOs specifically, bankroll your opponent in the next election. But guess what? You're still doing something that's worthwhile because you're standing up for what's right. You're advocating for a policy that would literally save thousands of lives every single year. So he doesn't get a pass for that, but he is kind of giving us this parting gift because he knows we were upset with him. He knows he didn't do the right thing, but he's giving us a gift, and that gift is information that, hey, there's a lot of people in Congress that probably want to support Medicare for All, but their consultants are telling them, don't do this if you want to keep your job. And maybe it's not even that they are choosing to not back Medicare for All because they're worried about losing their re-election because they're self-interested, even though I'm sure that plays a part in it. Maybe they're just thinking, look, I care about issues X, Y, and Z, and I just want to make sure I keep my job so I can fight for these issues. Maybe it's not even nefarious. But for whatever reason, people in D.C. are influencing Democrats to back down from Medicare for All, to ignore the will of their constituents when we are begging and pleading with them for Medicare for All. So in revealing this to us, Ruben is kind of giving us a really important gift here. And that gift is information. He's saying, this is kind of what's at stake. In other words, you know how to craft your argument. What's going to speak to them, in addition to the stories, because Shillen's story clearly resonated with him, what's going to speak to them is something that counters what they've been told by the consultant class in Washington, D.C. And I want to go an extra step here and give credit where it's due to Ruben here, because what he's saying here, think about what that means for his career prospects. He's a one-term representative, and his only hope at this point of being wealthy is to do what Stephen Horsford did and become a lobbyist. But by revealing this information to us, what lobbying firm is going to hire him? He's kind of doing something that bucks the narrative, that bucks DC orthodoxy. You're not supposed to reveal this information. I mean, we're in a time where people are really blowing the lid off of all of the bullshit that goes on in DC. You have Ocasio-Cortez tweeting about how Goldman Sachs is talking to freshman members of Congress and basically indoctrinating them into neoliberal corporatism. And now we have Ruben Kihuen saying, look, for those of us that wanted to back Medicare for all, we were told not to do that. They're trying to pin us down and tie our hands so we don't do that. And that's really a damn shame. But in terms of Ruben Kihuen signing on to Medicare for all, even though it serves nothing more than symbolism at this point, right? He's just signaling to us that he's with us. Even though that doesn't necessarily mean much now since he's leaving, it's still really important, and I do appreciate the gesture here because he chose ultimately to not only respond finally in the way that we wanted him to respond, but he decided to pay tribute to Shalyn, which was really, really important. It touched me when I saw him say her name. So even if it didn't go the way we expected it to, even if what happened in Congressional District 4 in Nevada didn't turn out the way we had hoped, at the end of the day, we still kind of won. Because we put pressure on a corporate Democrat who didn't support Medicare for all, and even if he didn't do what we wanted him to, because of nefarious forces in DC, what we said still resonated with him. And that in and of itself is important, and it shows just how powerful progressives are. What Ruben is doing is he's kind of paving the way for us to put pressure on Stephen Horsford, because we already know he's not going to co-sponsor HR 676. I would be shocked if he did. But he's probably not going to support Medicare for all. So what Ruben just did is give us this information that if Stephen Horsford doesn't back Medicare for all, it's because he lacks the political courage to do so. It's because there are consultants that the Democratic Party establishment hires to try to convince them to not endorse Medicare for all. But the good news is that there's over 100 Democrats in the House that co-sponsored HR 676. It's just a matter of getting those last holdouts to come to our side. And there's going to be a war within the Democratic Party, a gigantic intra-party battle between progressives and corporate Democrats when it comes to Medicare for all. But we will not back down.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.